Welcome to Future Forward, a podcast where we share AI insights, one expert at a time. I'll be talking to experts from various backgrounds, ranging from academia to startups, scale-ups, and corporates. Welcome. Hi there, I'm Davio, CEO at Radix, and your host for today. I'm here with Kenny. Kenny is an expert in climate, biotech, and AI, and the crossroad between those. He's now working at Carbion and at the VIB, and the Flemish Biotech Institute, if I'm translating that well. But more on that, you can give a bit more on that yourself. So welcome, Kenny. How are you?
I'm having a great day. The sun is shining again, so everything's fine.
All right. So you're active in climate, biotech, and AI. Can you elaborate a bit more on what you're doing today?
Right. So I, maybe going a bit back, I studied biomedical sciences. So I learned a lot about protein chemistry. And but after that, I did a PhD into bioinformatics, where I learned all about statistics, data science, software engineering. But after about 6 years university, moved on to industry and to get more proficient with software engineering and machine learning.
Years, so you did your PhD and then you did a postdoc as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Okay. All of that and protein chemistry, mass spectrometry. Not going there today, but it is relevant because it gives me some backgrounds. Because maybe jumping a bit ahead, a lot of things are moving in AI and protein science as well today. And so I'm having like in my
rearview
mirror
both today.
If I look back 15 years, I know what we could do there, and we already had 3D structured protein databases that were being used as data sources today. So I kind of have the some background to reflect and to use today as well. So I was in the last 10 years working as a software engineer, machine learning team lead. Worked at Sony, Biotech in the pocket. But then 2 years ago, I kind of felt like I really wanted to have some impact with what I'm doing with machine learning and data. And the biggest challenge of our time is related to climate change. And so I ventured into this global community, which is Climate Change AI, which I'm still a contributor to. And these guys, it's like a community, a platform where data scientists and machine learning engineers get together and collect all that can be done to tackle climate change with data and machine learning.
So they're looking into, okay, we have this challenge. What can data and AI help us to solve this or to tackle this?
It will never be a silver bullet, right? But it's all things like energy optimization in large buildings, from using computer vision to process satellite imaging. For instance, one of the biggest sources that's harming the climate is methane emission, leaks of methane. These can be spotted via satellite imaging, but the world is big, so it's very good if you have satellite imaging and have AI to help you
detect.
With that.
So you don't have people,
and you can act quickly. So it's not like weeks in a row they have some methane leaks that are doing big harm to the atmosphere. Methane is far more potential than CO2, and so getting these things as quickly as possible is important, and AI is a helpful tool to help it. So these kind of tasks.
The climate change, AI is one of the things that you're working on today, which you're contributing to?
Yeah, so it's a global organization, and in Belgium I just try to facilitate this community and organize some meetups around the topic. We'll be picking it back up, I guess, in the next quarter. There will be some more meetups coming on because there's a lot of interest.
And so the climate change is sort of a forum organized internationally, but it has its local footprints and chapters. And so what it does is bringing people together, seeing how can we solve those challenges. Is that it in a nutshell?
Yeah, but you can easily connect on the global platform, and you have people in there who are active on the EU policy level, and who are also, when you have parliamentary talks on climate change and AI, you have people from Climate Change AI participating in a debate in the European Parliament and so on. So it's a lot of academic people in there as well.
It's a forum of experts with local chapters
who know the challenges, who know what's to be done on climate change, but who also know what's machine learning engineering, what can we do, what can we not do.
Yep. All right. So that's number one. Number two is
so that's where so about 2 years ago I started rolling into that domain, and I really wanted to work on and have some impact towards climate change. Have and by 2030, I have the feeling that I've been working together with a company that's able to impact or reduce 1 million tons of CO2. These are things we really have to do. And so then I also got in contact with a Dutch company called Carbion, for which I'm working now part of my time. And they're building a direct air capture device, which is...
So is that like what we've seen on the media, the big machines that pull in air and get the CO2 stuck and then
the ones you've probably seen
clean air out or something?
Are the ones from Climeworks. They're building these CO2 vacuum cleaners, and they're building these pilot plants in Iceland, where they can capture them and put them directly under the ground for permanent storage. So yes, Carbion is within that space. They're also building a machine that's able to capture atmospheric CO2, but they're aiming for instance, Climeworks right now, it costs them about 500 to 600 euro to capture 1 ton of CO2. To have an idea, we have to be able to capture 10 billion tons of CO2 per year by 2050. So it's an industry that has to scale up enormously in the next few years and decades. So with Carbion, we're aiming to reduce that cost to about 100 euro per ton.
And is that then the point of where it becomes economically very interesting, or?
There will have to be, and the whole economy has to grow around that, because in the end you're building a whole industry to put something back under the ground. So it has to be subsidized. But it's absolutely essential that we will be doing this in the next decades to tackle the climate.
But I assume companies are incentivized today also because they have the CO2 tax.
You see, for instance, companies like Microsoft and Google having carbon neutral pledges by 2030, 2035, right? But these big data warehouses that consume plenty of energy, so they're part of the strategy is to build that close to where you have a lot of solar and wind energy to power the data warehouses. But I think not everything can be solved by just by clean energy. They also have a lot of overhead. A lot of the energy that these data centers are using cannot just be covered by clean energy. And the surplus that they will still be having, they're buying enough, and they're then buying tons of CO2.
They're buying CO2 from other companies to get that to zero.
They're paying Climeworks, or companies like Climeworks, hopefully like Carbion, to remove 1,000 tons of CO2 for the atmosphere, because they still had 1,000 tons of CO2 too much in the data center in the Netherlands.
Yep.
So that's then part of their operating model, and also how we will be paying for carbon removal ourselves, right? Because it will be part of the data center pricing. But if you see these pledges from Microsoft and Google and data centers that they will be carbon neutral by 2030, 2035, they're also betting or hoping or will be needing these technologies.
Yeah, definitely.
So are we using plenty of AI there today? Not yet. It's really building machine learning, and AI always starts with getting your data right.
So at what stage is Carbion today? They have an operating machine. They're developing it.
Developing a prototype. Prototype phase. If you visit the website, we have some very cool pictures there. We have life-size. You have 2 life-size machines in there. I'll put it in the podcast notes. And they're the prototype is about 3 meters long. And yeah, it's just very cool to see a real machine.
And there you'll be sucking in air, extracting CO2. And what's the job that you're doing then? Helping that, optimizing that in the
I'm just part of the research team and helping I always try to focus as much as possible on your users, right? So there is the research team that are developing a sorbent that's capturing CO2. So how can we help them find that best possible sorbent with data, with the best possible software, with some machine learning, if not needed. We'll just skip that, but just be as close as possible to what they need to do their science.
And the sorbent, it's the thing where the CO2 sticks to. It's the sponge or anything, or I don't know how to call that.
It's nanotech. It's carbon fibers that are activated.
But it conceptually, it's a sponge. They get through, and the CO2 sticks to it.
Yes.
Okay. And finding that material, that's the hardest part of what Carbion is doing.
Yes.
And so you're using
too much in there because there's a lot of IPR in there as well. But the research, that's one of the main activities of a research team, and because we have to drive down that cost and being as efficient as possible to capturing CO2 from the atmosphere, and optimizing the chemistry beyond that is part of the research team.
And so you are supporting them with data and AI in finding that best.
Yes, developing heuristics, algorithms to process the data, organizing the data, building tooling for them to automate as much as possible.
So I can imagine then they're probably doing iteration after iteration, trying out new compositions. They get data from it. I'm trying to imagine how that works. They get data from it, and then you help process that data to know, does this work well or not, or something like that?
Well, no, they do the analysis.
Okay.
The typical R&D environment where people hypothesize, they conceive experiments, they have a whole backlog of experiments, they execute them, they generate data, and they have to analyze the data. But so everything, that's how to organize the data, creating tooling for quality assurance, helping them create figures and plots that bring together a lot of information.
So it's finding structure in that data that you're helping with then?
You have a lot of research software people that know a bit how to script, and they know some matplotlib, and they can do some figures, but then at the end of the day, the code base is like a lot of spaghetti, and they're just putting a lot of time into that.
Okay. You're building a platform for them to do that,
to help them do
more
their
rigorously,
job more effective. And in the end, to increase data quality, data reliability,
which in the end will boil down to they can do experiments faster and better.
That's exactly.
Yeah. Okay. So you're using AI and data to help them to do their experiments faster. That's basically what it boils down to, if you would summarize that. Yeah. Okay. Nice. So that's Carbion.
Yes.
And when is it planned to have a first version?
I don't know for sure actually, but I think they aim to be a market in a couple of years, but I cannot. We're about 30 to 40 people right now.
So it's funded on a long trajectory then.
No, it's like every scale up, you have to go through Series A, B, C fundings, right? Ideally, we hope to be producing millions of these devices by 2030. Because that's needed to reach this gigaton scale.
But it's more of a deep tech in the sense that your steps from ABC are not based on the revenues or the traction you have. It will be on the results on the research that...
if we reach the 100 euro per ton costs.
That's the point. There's a certain...
Yeah, then it gets economically viable. This is a number where a lot of people are pointing towards, and if we succeed with that, there will be a huge market. Again, to give you an idea, we will be needing to capture about 10 billion of tons of CO2 per year out of the atmosphere. These are projections from IPCC. That's the equivalent of like the volume of about 400 Empire State Buildings. So we have to, pure liquid CO2, we have to extract from the atmosphere again and put it back under the ground by 2050. It's basically the oil industry in reverse along that scale. And it's nowhere today. So it's one of the biggest opportunities as well. There's a lot of critics out there who don't believe it will be possible, but I'm very optimistic by nature. And I it's definitely a cause worth fighting for and putting your time in. So I'm very happy to be working with them today.
Right. So that's Carbion.
Yeah.
Then you have a third project.
Along the same lines, I think. So I have a background in biotechnology as well, and so there's a lot of things to be done as well with biotech and climate tech. So and Belgium, we're pretty strong in biotech. So it was one of my ultimate goals is to venture in that position, because I think a lot of biotech in Belgium today is focused toward health and human health and life science. But we have a lot of human capabilities, technical know-how to also venture into that space, or to broaden our biotech industry and into climate tech as well. But if you start talking to, we have organizations like Clean Tech Flanders or Vito, who have like a focus towards climate tech. As soon as you mention biotech to them, they always refer to VIB, which is the Flemish Institute for Biotechnology. But their mission is about supporting, doing cutting edge research in life science. So it is part of their mission, but most of the research is focused towards human health. Most departments are there. But there's plenty of opportunities out there in climate tech and biotech. Plenty of startups abroad, and I see a big opportunity in Flanders and Belgium to also I hope to see these companies growing here as well.
So what you're saying is that in the biotech, you can use that for climate to tackle climate change.
There are one example that I like is, for instance, there's a company in Canada, I guess, so they call it Biomason, and they have engineered a strain of bacteria. So imagine what I'm saying, engineering bacteria, right? These organisms have been growing over millions of years, but now we have been growing the capacity, the capability to really engineer bacteria, to cut out genes, to insert new genes, to manipulate expression, to do all kind of things, to let these bacteria do things that we want them to do. So they've developed a strain of bacteria that's able to make covalent bonds in a certain sand mixture. And basically what they are now able to do is to build bricks, to build houses at environmental temperature. So you don't have to heat them. So you don't have to have these big furnaces.
So do you take sand?
You can
add that, and then
they make bricks without heating and baking them. So which takes a lot of the.
But it's the same basic materials as bricks, as traditional bricks. But they add that.
I don't think it's exactly the same, but they're leveraging these bacteria to make these bonds and to give the solidity to this brick. And the brick is as strong as concrete, but it doesn't need to be baked in an oven, so it doesn't need fire. It has the energy footprint and the carbon footprint thereby is far lower. But so these are like future construction companies, but they're also biotech companies, right? Because they're leveraging biology and not just something that's out there. They're really fine-tuning bacteria towards helping them to make these bricks. So
that's insane.
These kind of I really like these examples to already have that there's a lot of people working that's not directly related to reducing the carbon footprint, but people who are building or creating enzymes to break down plastics, so to tackle the plastic pollution and so on. So these are also things we were just completely unable to do like 10 years ago. Well, we tried, but we were just not as effective. And
why is it working today?
Because we had these big breakthroughs like AlphaFold, where everybody heard from, where you can predict protein structures and are like correct in like 85% of the times, whereas that used to be just I think close to 20 or 30%. So that's like a.
So you're saying AlphaFold? So AlphaFold is an AI model, basically, yes. A deep learning model trained on all of the old protein, the ones we know, and is now capable of predicting a new structure.
Yes.
But because of that capability, so you're combining that with biotech, it becomes viable.
Well, AlphaFold was kind of a breakthrough. Like the whole field of AI has been disrupted, like also computer vision and speech transcription, everything, right? You know this, and the field of biotechnology has also been disrupted. You see, and that was part of AlphaFold. Also has a lot of these deep learning methodologies that were applied by DeepMind, but that inspired the whole community. And to give you an idea about the latest cutting edge models we've been building, you know, for instance, that the diffusion models, which were all the hype like last year and were powering Midjourney.
Diffusion models, Midjourney to generate pictures.
And but these models are able to create pictures from noise, right? So the denoising part of the diffusion models, you have random noise points and it's able to create a picture. These ideas have been applied also in biotechnology, wherein you have, for instance, the surface area of a spike protein of COVID, and you have like a
so you're imagining like everybody's seen that the COVID with all the spikes, that form you see, okay?
Yeah, and you have like a point cloud, random noise cloud around the surface area of spike protein. And you then have, they've been fine-tuning models like AlphaFold or Rosetta Fold, which is the same models, fine-tuned to denoise the point clouds into protein structure. So you go from noise so that it fits the energy area of the spike protein. So you can.
So what does that mean then? So if that fits, what can you do with it?
You can start binding with it. You can target with it.
And that means if you can target it, that you can.
It becomes a playground. You can. It becomes a playground to experiment. It's a whole new.
But if you can bind with it, you can attack it. So that's the path to making a cure for it.
It could be a cure or to kill it. Yes, that's one idea. But for instance, with going back to the plastics where it started from, you have some enzymes. I don't know the real specifics about it, but that are able to break down these plastic polymer chains, but not certain types of plastics. So they now can like mutate and change the enzymes and in silico model which ones could be able to break down certain bonds. And so the in silico part has been growing tremendously, and this is being powered by this new generation of AI models.
So, I mean, you can do it virtually. You can simulate it. So, and because of that, and because of using AI and simulating, you can do a lot of tests, and you can speed up the process of discovering the right enzyme with an order of a magnitude or several orders of magnitude.
Yeah. For instance, so the recent papers have been. Showing, I think, success rates of like, I think 3 out of 10 predicted protein structures when you then actually express them in an organism and then look into the biomicroscope and approximate, does this protein look like what we predicted it to be on the computer actually folds into that structure. And that used to be just like 1 in 1,000 or so. So it's the success rate or to do you have this gap from the sim to real gap, also known in other fields in robotics as well, right? You can simulate the robotics, but when you then apply the model on a real robot, it has all kind of constraints or physical parameters it didn't take into account, and then the robot just completely fails. So there's like a gap of the simulated environment and in the real world. So it's a bit similar that you're designing proteins on a computer screen, but in the end they have to be real proteins, right? And so this gap is a lot smaller right now.
So basically, how I understand that, and correct me if I'm wrong, is you have a huge search space. So basically, you have a gazillion options of what that protein could be, and before AlphaFold we just tested, but 1 out of 1,000 worked. So that means that we did 999 tests, which ended up with nothing. Now we do 3 out of 10. So that means that the amount of experiments or the amount of time we put into it, we find a lot more positive results. So It goes a lot faster again. That's basically the point.
Yeah, it's not.
But that's where we are at in research today then?
Yeah.
Or do we see the first practical use cases already?
I think it's still research, but you do see some startups coming along, and I would doubt that. So drug discovery pipelines of pharmaceutical companies, they also have like 4 or 5 big stages, that the discovery units of these pharmaceutical companies are not exploring these kind of things. I would be surprised.
Yeah.
So if is it already in market? No, the life cycle is way too long. But I just think that this is opening up a whole new design space. So we'll be doing a lot of new things, different things that we weren't doing 10 years ago in a couple of years. And I really like to see that it's like a playground.
It's a new market, what you're saying.
Market is from a commercial perspective, but from an engineering perspective, it's really like a new toolbox. It's a design space that's really opening up. People will be able to do new things with these new technologies.
So, and does that mean if you are a bioengineer or working in that sector, that will be your future toolbox?
It's an interesting question because I do see a big gap between bioengineering people and so it's one thing to understand machine learning, and then the leap towards diffusion models is an even bigger leap, and so it's quite a big leap. So I think this will have to be productized, and you also see companies that are making a product out of this, and I think that the bioengineers will be using these tools because right now they have become way more effective. While it used to be just 1 in 1,000, and you don't have time to test out thousands of designs. Right now, you can expect it to be 3 or 4 out of 10 correctly.
What you're saying then as well is you're talking about designs often in the new stage of generative AI that has advanced a lot. That's basically really up that alley, making a lot more designs in a lot shorter time. So we'll see.
Yeah, I think
see
so.
a lot bigger impact there as well.
AI is it's the latest wave of automation. It's speeding up a lot of things. I don't know about you, but I have a huge backlog of things I want to do. I guess you as well. So I think I'm happy that I can do these things faster, and I don't think I will run out of work. I'll just to be able to do more in a shorter time frame. But yes, I think it does fit into that picture.
What you were saying is, so we're having biotech, which is maturing as a science. We having AI in support of that to make it faster, and then you can match that with climate change.
Yes.
So that becomes a huge opportunity and way of dealing with climate change. Those two working together in recycling plastics, in capturing carbon, in making energy low or energy efficient bricks. So that's the area you're working in, and that's where it's moving towards. How do you see that in the next year or two?
Well, maybe so first your point, I think biotech is a very mature science and discipline already. Just there will be a huge revolution is going on everything is more software driven, data driven, and I also see a lot of inflow from more tech companies, and a lot of things tech companies have learned being applied in biotech companies to focus more on incremental improvements, iterative design, and so seeing these things applied in biotech environments will also speed up these companies, and we will see a whole new wave of these biotech companies.
Whereas before they were more, if you're saying now iterative, they were more waterfall, as in very long cycles, or how does that compare to how they did it before?
It's still I don't think a waterfall is not going anywhere, right? It will still be the default for many companies because you have funding round for the couple of 2-3 years, and investors want to have a plan of like what will we be doing in 2 and 3 years. So it is a hard thing to convince them of a more agile method and saying, we really don't know what we will be doing in 6 months. Likely we will be aiming on that, but there will be some challenge that will be coming up and we'll be doing something else. It's a hard sell, but in reality, it often goes like that. And that's why you have to focus on the team. You have to trust the mission, what's the North Star, where are people going towards, and give them the means to reach that goal. But so that on waterfall agile, it's still a hard sell, but I do think
So to coming back to your point, what I meant is you're saying that they have to adapt. So life sciences, biotech companies, they are adapting to a more iterative approach as compared to a slower approach.
You see breeds. I'm not saying they're all changing. And by pharma, neither, I guess. I'm not working in a pharma company, so I cannot really say that. But I do see a whole new breed of biotech startups across the world with founders who are coming from a tech background and who are applying these methods in these biotech companies, as opposed to the more traditional waterfall style.
So what I'm hearing then, is that correct? That because of the evolution of AI, you get a lot faster, you get better, more designs you can work around, you can iterate faster. So going towards the solution, it's about that iteration a lot more than it was before.
It's probably speeding up the cycle, right? So it's every company has its own process, but typically you have this learning loop, right? And if it used to be, or if it's now 6 months, you're like targeting it to, if you improve 3 or 4 parts or automate some parts of the cycle, you can maybe reduce the cycle time to like 2 or 3 months and have like 6 iterations instead of 4 iterations in a year and learn a lot more. I think one of the success stories in biotech there is a company called Ginkgo Bioworks. It's a US company. They're in synthetic biology, and they have been founded about 10 years ago by mainly a group of software engineers who are, and everything within their labs, they're automating as much as possible. And the design of constructs or how they're applying certain kind of gene edits, everything is organized as a code basis. Everything is designed in a modular technology so they can reuse as much as possible. This is a software engineering mentality, right? If we've done something twice, let's refactor it, and so the third time we'll reuse it. And so they're really applying this kind of methodology in a biotech service company. So it's these kind of companies that I think are like the breeding of the tech world and the biotech world. You didn't see these companies 30 years ago because then software engineering was still emerging.
It's a bit like Tesla is now a computer on wheels. They have to focus a lot more on software. I don't know, there was a hype on LinkedIn on the Ford CEO saying that their biggest problem is that they have 150 suppliers writing code for them and they don't communicate, and that's the problem why they have a hard time right now. That's basically the same then, but for biotech and life sciences.
Yes. Yeah. And I think also one of the, if you talk to life science people who are running a lab, or you have something like GLP, good laboratory practices, everybody knows them. We know how to run a lab, how to do it well, how to do it clean, how to organize everything. And I think that within software engineering, we also have like good software engineering practices. And I think that in the last 5 to 10 years with cloud computing, we have like a more general way of developing good software. While that was more bit into the open, like 20 or 30 years ago. And so I think that this general notion of how to build good digital products has emerged over the last 5 to 10 years. And these companies have not been applying that. And it's also about how to embrace these good software engineering methodologies in this research biotech mindset.
All right. So, and now we have the start. It really started getting mainstream this year. Generative AI, large language models. potentially even
Exciting
more
times.
than that. How did that change anything for you in Carbion or in the VIB?
Very exciting times, I would say, right? I'm still am surprised by it, like on a weekly basis, how fast these things are going and how fast this has evolved and how
Have you seen it coming?
Bit, but not this good. I think I remember I give a talk a couple of years ago at the CIO forum, saying with one big slide, computers are a mastering language. It was like the early days of transformer models. I see BERT models, and because that was already pretty powerful, right? So it was like a huge breakthrough that computers could read documents and do some classification, and this was already a lot better than what we were used to like 10 years ago with RNNs and TF, IDF, and how it was just old school language modeling. So I was already impressed at that time, and if you look into the history of GPT paper, GPT-2, GPT-3, I didn't see the big leap of how good it would be. So we basically get like an intern writer. Intern is like it's not good enough because it probably writes better than I can. It's so good at writing. So yeah, I'm just flabbergasted by how fast it has been evolving and how well it's yeah.
And how does it do you see, so it emerged around the end of last year, beginning this year, and then we really started seeing the possibilities. Have you noticed that in climate change as well, in climate change AI or in Carbion? Was there like, oh shit, now we can do this wasn't possible?
Not that much, actually. I think people are really still in the early phase of recognizing it. I still hear a lot of people saying, it's just predicting the next words. And I always tell them, I also just talk word by word. It's so much more, right? It does give some understanding, and you can give it pretty complex things to, and it's understanding these kind of things. Yeah, I think people still often underestimate it, how good these things is. And then I hear some people saying, or people are still using just a normal GPT 3.5, while the GPT-4 is a lot better, I guess. One thing that I find very interesting to see is how fast the open source world is following up, because like just 1 year ago, we were just using GPT-3 via an API still. We hadn't heard about ChatGPT. We hadn't been using GPT-4. Right now, we already have the Llama 2 model, right, which everybody can fine-tune, which is about as good as ChatGPT. But you can just run it locally, the lesser billion parameter version on your MacBook. You can fine-tune it to your own knowledge base for free. It's an open source license. So I think the speed open source is following up on this is encouraging. I think that's a very nice evolution. Interesting to see how that will evolve.
And how do you see that impacting Carbion or your work at the VIB?
My work, I think
everybody
will be. I think everybody will be having this personal assistant. The promise of a personal assistant has been out there for a while. I think this will get
and how do you see that materialize, a personal assistant? As a bioengineer, I have my bio assistant.
A language model that understands what I'm writing, what I'm thinking, what I'm doing on a daily basis, that has a lot more context about my world, right? Mm-hmm. Because right now, you can give like a context of like, I think in Cloud it has like 100,000 tokens. Might already fit my workday. But it doesn't learn, it doesn't evolve. I always have to initialize it with the prompt, with my context. So I think everybody will be running, or every company will be having its own. We'll have plenty of fine-tuned models. Like we all have our mobile phone. We'll have like our companion model that's like fine-tuned to who I am, who knows me. And so I think we're moving towards that direction.
And what will that bring to you or to a professional?
It'll speed up a lot of things. Everything just goes faster and faster.
And practically, let's say I have such a companion, what will it do for me? I will talk to it. It will do research for me, or how do you see that?
It's I think the use cases are yet to be discovered. I think it will be probably far more exciting than what I can imagine right now, given I also could not predict what GPT-4 would already be doing today for me. It's impossible for me to predict what it will be doing next year. Let it 10 years, what will it be doing? So it's helping you write, or as like a sparring partner, I always like to have when I'm in a job, you have some ideas, but you just want to ping pong and to improve upon an idea. So I guess that these models will also be able to to challenge, to find some mistakes in your thinking and so on. Even though people are now, it makes mistakes. Sometimes makes mistakes, but it can also spot some issues or mistakes that I'm making. So that will be helpful. I think how I already use it when you have like an error in your code, and you can just give it the stack trace, and it's usually right spot on finding your mistake. And I could have also find it to debug myself and fix it myself if you give me like maybe 10 minutes, 20 minutes, you don't know. But it just took me 2 minutes, right? So everything is just speeding up. So that also sometimes worries me a bit, I guess, because in our society already everything is going way too fast. People are signaling I cannot follow. People are burned out. I will be just gearing up. Everything will start to go even faster. So there will be a question: will this lead to I can do the same amount of work in just 4 hours a day because everything goes faster, or will I be doing double the work in 8 hours per day? Will I be speeding up? And I guess it will be the second one.
And that speeding up, you're scared people will run too fast. Then it will be coming sprints every day, and
it's already like that, right? You're multitasking everywhere, getting on Slack, email, you're doing so much at the same time. And I think that will go even faster. You'll have, it will go even faster, everything.
So, and then you're worried that people will, because it's too much, they won't keep up the pace. But doesn't that boil down to the way we build those companions? As in, some things, usually a task that you do in a day is a part of a bigger assignment that you do that takes you weeks or even months. You can try and do that weeks and months in a day maybe, but focus on that one thing instead of having to do the way I'm trying to understand what you're saying is today, let's say on a day you do 10 tasks. I figure, I don't know what an exact number would be, but that you would suddenly have to do 20 or 30 tasks. But maybe that number of tasks doesn't change, but the amount of time you put in every task or the output you can generate in the same time just becomes bigger. This is becoming maybe very almost philosophical. So
we still have to start about AGI.
But so you're saying one of the worries that you have is using this technology. It might be very difficult for some people to follow. But how would you address that then? Is that then companies that they need to educate their people, or how?
Yeah, it's probably getting the people to work with these new tools. But there are two things, right? I think it will speed up everything, and the main thing companies can do there is make sure that to stay engaged and in touch with the employees, that they can keep off following the pace, that they don't burn out even quicker. But on the other hand, it's about a lot of people really don't know how to use these tools yet today, and getting them on board, right? To help them maybe in the end, these LLMs, I think, and AI should augment human capabilities, right? They should help them lead happier lives, be more effective at what they're doing. To guide, I think the role of companies is to guide their employees using these models, using this technology on that direction. Not to squeeze them out more or avoid that happens.
And how do you, so let's fast forward a bit. How do you see this moving in the next few years?
That's
both on a biotech and climate change. What are the things you see happening?
I think
maybe to help to probe the brain a bit also. In a previous discussions, what I've learned is so far. So what we see is LLMs now moving towards multimodality. So not only text but images and other types of data, and then potentially the idea of agents or more autonomous things that they can do actions and then you have more reasoning capabilities. How do you see this coming?
I think it's
happening in climate change and biotech.
I'm always very skeptical about how we will be applying new technology in the next few years, right? So much examples, if you look into history about we have new technology, people making predictions how we'll be using it, and they're completely off, right?
Okay.
So I think most important thing is that we will be advancing towards these goals, right? So how figure out on a daily basis what are the challenges in front of us, and how we'll use this new technology to make progress. And
so what you're saying is not focusing on that use case, but focusing on
the needs, on the problems.
Yeah. Okay.
Where are the problems today, and how can we overcome, help them, improve upon them?
So how would you make that tangible if you look at biotech or climate change?
I think now here on the spot, imagining LLMs and climate change, I don't see it actually reducing CO2 emissions, right? It's all the people who are already working on this today who might do their job better or more effective or have some breakthroughs using these new technologies. But there will be working on the same challenges. In biotech, it's just too wild to imagine. For instance, recently I saw this paper I really couldn't have imagined, like last year, where in the US you have a fully cloud-based laboratory, fully equipped with mass spectrometers, pipettes, chemical reagents, everything.
What do you mean with cloud?
And you can
everything you do there.
It's fully automated, and you can control it via an API. Okay. What they then gave GPT-4 full documentation to the API, and then they asked GPT-4, "Do you know how to synthesize ibuprofen?" And then it also figured that out, and it could connect both things. And then they gave GPT-4 the instruction to synthesize ibuprofen, and it was able to do that.
So synthesize ibuprofen, what does that mean?
Like in the lab, combining the chemical reagents, heating it up until you have the medicine. Actually creating. So GPT-4 attached to an API, which is linked to a full-on lab, yes,
but fully automated, yes, is capable of creating ibuprofen. That's what you're saying.
And they also in the paper tried out whether it could instruct create nerve gas or biochemical weapons, and GPT-4 rejected those kind of prompts. So they already thought about people will be asking for these kind of things, which is, I think they're going great lengths already fending that off.
So but if you're saying that, so combining that with what you previously said, in the next 10, 20 years, what we'll have is you'll have some kind of alpha or zeta fold or kind of model which simulates proteins, which then communicates it to a fully automated lab who can test it out and who can really do it in real life and see if it works or not, and then have a feedback loop and then do this automated. Is that how far it can go at some point?
The example I gave is that you can make 10 simulations of proteins that can fall into a certain structure, and 3 or 4 of them will lead into that. You have to express them, and this is still a lot of wet lab work. So yes, in theory, that's something you might be expecting, that you will have the combination of these de novo protein design tools, and it's basically just the synthetic part is growing, right? Mm-hmm. Because it will be more computer work, and but the wet lab work will be done by robots, part of it.
And what do you mean with the wet lab work?
Wet lab work is pipetting, combining real solvents. It's the real world. Huh? It's wet lab work. I don't see that happening in 2 years. But by the time I will be retired, I don't think humans will still be doing this. So there will be transition, and but now I am making long-term predictions, not to do that.
I'm trying to get them out of you.
You ever saw the example of the when we had the first robots being announced in the 50s or the 60s, I guess. And they were they were making these illustrations that because we now have electricity, we have machines, in 10 years' time, we will have a robot that's doing your clothes washing. And you have these lovely illustrations of a plumpy robot that looks like a nurse, and it's like washing the clothes. We never got that robot who's washing my clothes. We did get a washing machine, right? But how we imagined that how it would evolve was completely off. But some things really did change profoundly. So and there are plenty of examples like that. The red flag, I actually know that one. In the early days of the cars, and in London, you have these lovely pictures that cars were way too dangerous, and so for horses and so on, and so cars had to be. There was law in UK. A real human had to walk with a red flag in front of a car across the street because cars could hurt people. So they couldn't really imagine what supply chain would be, how it would be driving to other cities, how the world would be more connected, what cars would bring us, right? But they did create a law. Every car had to be preceded by a human with a red flag to warn other people. So I think history is full of these examples where new technology emerges and we make completely bad predictions on where this will lead us,
yep.
But it will transform a lot.
But at the same time, what you also see, which I find very interesting, is that a lot of things that were predicted 30 years ago weren't there yet, okay, but are now happening. So it's like technology is.
What's the main one there?
For instance, electrical cars. You have one. I think it's 1953 in Brussels. So it's 70 years old, that car, and I think it had a range of 40 kilometers or 30.
Okay.
So and they have been talking about that for a very long time. Even SpaceX, if you read about it, apparently Boeing was working on it for 20 years on how we can reuse rockets, because that was a known challenge if we can solve that. But technology wasn't ready yet. Mm-hmm. So these things, they talk about it. You have both sides of it, and that's indeed very interesting. Often we can't imagine it, but at the same time, often things happen, but just a lot later, because we overestimate the speed at which we will be able to use technology. Mm-hmm. Because a robot helping you at home, Optimus from Tesla, is now saying again that will happen. Might happen right now. If you look at RT2, if that evolves in the next 5 to 10 years, who knows? You won't have to.
Yeah, it was a nice illustration again. Or you see these flagpoles moving week by week, and the example of pick up the extinct animal. That was the RT2 example, right? And it's picking up the dinosaur from a full table, so it's combining the LLMs to real action. The big breakthrough there, I because with LLMs, this is all in the browser. We're just talking and communicating with them, right? And so it's making predictions, but it doesn't have any real actions in the real world.
It's away from the physical world.
But there, when you start including robots in the story, and language, there is the operating system of humans. And computers have been, I think we can say they've mastered language, right? And so that will probably be the big surprises of the next few years, how this will translate into the real world. Because right now it's still seeing it again in the browsers. How will this translate into?
So I think you've made some nice predictions on how this will move into the physical world, and maybe even labs, turning them completely into iterative and fast ways of making new drugs and enzymes. Now, because we have to look at the time, unfortunately, you need to wrap up. But I always want to ask one question. If you see this moving forward, there's a lot of opportunities, there's a lot of challenges. And usually if you ask it, you have like some people are saying this is a dystopian future, Terminator, whatever. And then you have others, the utopian future where everything is sunshine and you know how you say that in English, roses and sunshine. It doesn't really work. But how do you see it? What's your dystopian future if you see this moving in a bad way?
Oh, you're asking for the negative outcome.
I'm asking for both, but let's start with the dystopian one.
With the dystopian one, well, I'm not in the group of people who is afraid of AGI taking over the world and dominating us. I don't see that happening. I think it's mainly because these models have like a motivation, right? And what we are afraid of is that like the paperclip maximizer, that it's going to be
Turn
very
this into paper clips.
Yeah, it's going to be very greedy and consume all resources. But things like greed and power, these are all very human emotions, right? They're part of our brains, human brains, human intelligence. And they're part of our brainstem, and this has been evolving over millions of years, and it has served us really well as humans because we're here right now. But there's no reason that an AGI will have those emotions that we're doing unless we explicitly program it into that. So I think that many of the fears come from projecting our violent human emotions, rudimentary emotions, onto this AGI, and I don't think AGI will have that. I don't see that happening. So that's, I think, the main foundation of why I'm not that afraid of AGI on itself. But the real threat and towards the dystopian future is, as with any technology, you can use it in a good way and you can use it in a bad way, and there are plenty of ways to use AGI or just current technology imagine 10,000 of R2T drones on a mission in, not naming any country, but in a military strike. You just don't want to see that they can fully act autonomously. They can communicate. They have vision. We can build that today. I hope we will not be building that, right? So applying this to military forces and so on, I think that's a scary direction, but we're heading there. I think I would be surprised that's not what's happening.
But you could even look at on a different way. Something I read was, even if that happens, if everybody has it, if robots are fighting, we're not fighting.
I don't know. I don't know if we won't be suffering, right?
It's also true.
But yeah, I understand your point, right? You have you have people saying that in the end there will be less human casualties, and that's a good thing. So maybe that will be an outcome that's hard to predict, and that would be a good thing. But there will be, yeah, I'm not going to make any predictions on that. Maybe another one. dystopian future, linking back to biotechnology, right? We just had like the COVID, and I think one threat, and the common threat is like viruses are self-replicating, and the big what we're afraid of with AGI is that it also gains a self-replicating capacity, so it will be able to just copy it everywhere and control the world. It will spread out through every network on every computer. Everything will have AGI. It will dominate the world. So the self-replication is like an important thing that we should be afraid of, because that's very dangerous.
So that we lose control over it. That's what you're saying.
Yeah. And I think with the all these evolutions within biotech, if some bad forces would be willing to design viruses with AI, and release that into the world, I'm more afraid that these kind of scenarios will turn out in the next 10 to 20 years, right?
Bioengineered weapons.
Yeah, these kind of things I'm more afraid of that, and I see that happening more because that's more related to ill-intended humans misusing novel technology. That's what we've been seeing, I think, over and over again. So, and that's what we should be focusing on or try to prevent. So that's, I think these are more the dystopian futures I'm afraid of than. I just think it's very unlikely that an AGI will take over the world and use all resources. I think it would start buying GPUs, but there are no GPUs out there, right?
That's your dystopian future, but how would the world be positively evolving? Let's say, what's your utopia if this all happens?
If this new AI technology is helping us to free up time as well, to spend more time with friends and family, to explore ourselves. And
what you were saying, to come back to the beginning, is that if we don't have to do 8 hours, but do 4 hours in the same work.
But I would still need a challenge to work on, right? So I wouldn't be willing to stop working at all. I think that would not make me any happier than I am today. So that's not the direction neither. You, as humans, you need some motivation, and that's driven by challenges, and you want to see progress, you want to collaborate with other humans. So I want to spend more time doing this, and if AI and technology helps me doing more of that, I think I will be fine. I think also a utopian that everybody gets more access to learn anything in any language across the whole world, I guess. That's a huge potential there.
So the access to knowledge.
Access to knowledge and time to learn and to grow and to I think that's important, and will have huge returns to the world as well. If we have 8 billion people growing to 11 billion people, if they have, all of us have better education, better opportunities to learn, to grow, I think in the end the world would be a better place.
So, and on that note, I think we can end here. Thank you, Kenny.
Thank you for having me, and let's stay positive for the future.
I think it was great having you. Thank you for listening, and see you next time.
Bye.
Thank you for listening. If you want to hear more, don't hesitate to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform for the next episodes of Future Forward, where we'll be unraveling the AI future, one expert at a time.